It was simply there on one humid morning about 6 weeks ago. I walked out of my house, looked right on the way to my car, and there it was. A black square in the middle of the street. I thought it was a strange box or something. Thinking nothing of it, I went off to get lunch. But it was still there when I returned. And this time the neighborhood kids that usually collectively played in the yard to my house's left were now instead off to the right, circled around the black square. They were talking, laughing, and poking it with sticks. Something didn't seem right about the scene, so I got out of my car and stood for a moment watching. What was wrong here? It hit me. They weren't poking at it. They were poking into it. One of the local teenagers was sitting on the porch behind me, so I knew the kids were being looked after. If it was some strange prank or something, well, I'd hear about it later. I headed back inside and returned to writing the day's story. Around 8 in the evening, someone began knocking on our front door. 2 of my roommates were in their rooms with their doors open, but we were all playing an online game together, so we ignored it and hoped that the guy in the room downstairs would get it. He either didn't hear it or didn't care, so we sat there listening to the pounding and knocking for about 15 minutes before one of my roommates logged off the game and stormed downstairs to the door. I heard, "What the hell do you want? None of us are parked in your goddamn spot. We never park in your spot." That didn't sound good. I left my computer and slid down the hallway to see what was going on. They told me stories about Bill and how he insisted that one section of the sidewalk was for his food truck, apparently. He'd go around at literally any time of the day or night, knocking on every single door in the neighborhood until he found the offender. This time, Bill was looking not for a car owner, but for the perpetrator of the black square prank. After much arguing, he finally moved on to the next house. But I couldn't go back to playing our game. Instead, I wandered out under evening orange and headed down the street. The black square was odd. Its angle seemed to be changing to match me, and I moved my head back and forth a few times rapidly to confirm that it always looked exactly square from any angle. Anton was sitting in his open garage in a lawn chair as I approached. He handed a man a bag, pocketed a stack of cash, and coughed and leaned back. The stranger hurried away without looking at me. It was not an unusual sight, standing in Anton's driveway, which ran straight at the black square, and Bill's house beyond. I asked, "Hey, what is this thing?" "No idea," he responded, "but it's got me on edge. It's been there all day. Thought maybe somebody was scoping me out, but it doesn't do nothing." I didn't want to get too close, so I picked up a stick. "Kids were messing with it earlier, right? Anything happen?" "Nah." It was strange. There seemed to be some sort of scaling perspective at work. As I moved closer to the square, it grew larger in my sight than the change in distance warranted. Far away, the effect had been imperceptible, but up close it was extremely unsettling. It felt as if the black square was looming up to encompass me. I might even leap out at any moment. It was becoming increasingly obvious that this was no prank. The sides were exactly equal in length from what I could see, and absolutely nothing showed or reflected on its surface. I'd seen Vanta black nano fabric in person once before, and that super black material had definitely left an impression on me. It had felt like staring into absolute void. And I had that same feeling now. The only difference was that my stick encountered no resistance as I moved it forward. I took one step. The stick still moved freely ahead. Was it past the threshold yet? It was disturbingly impossible to tell because the square always seemed to be facing me, so I couldn't tilt left or right and get a look from the side. The square also got bigger faster than it should have with each step, so I couldn't get a good idea of exactly where it began and ended. Worst of all, the forward perspective had no landmarks, no shadows. It felt as if I was inside a television somehow, and reaching forward into a CGI background. The studio lights off-screen were still lighting the stick, and I was reaching into something that didn't really exist. I swung my branch left and right. There was no edges to strike either. The pointed end traversed from ultra-black to the green of Bill's lawn, and back with no resistance. It was then that I truly understood that we were in trouble. "Hey, Anton. What's up?" He was usually one to play it cool, but I could tell by his subtly concerned expression that it must have looked very strange standing in front of complete nothingness. Let's, how to phrase it? Let's make sure nobody goes near this." He nodded and gave a nervous laugh. We didn't have any sort of housing association or community building, so it would really be up to word of mouth. Bill was 2 houses past ours now, still knocking on doors, and he was doing a decent accidental job of warning everyone. A few neighbors had come out onto their lawns to stare at the thing, and I saw Idle emerging one lawn over. While studying the black square from afar, she shivered and pulled her headscarf a little closer. I smoothed down my shirt reflexively as she approached. She stopped on the sidewalk just short of Anton's driveway. "What is the square?" We shook our heads. "You call police?" she asked, looking at me. Anton leaned back in his seat and watched us. Put on the spot, all I could say was, I don't think so." She was visibly confused. "Why not?" Anton snickered. "Cops don't come here, girl." "Police don't come to this area?" "Nah, they do. Trust me, you don't want them. They don't come here to help." "Oh." She looked down at the ground, then over to the black square, and then to her front door. She departed without a word. The rest of the neighbors began to emerge from their homes as Bill pissed them off in sequence, but we didn't meet or talk beyond the distant glances of confusion and confirmation. I didn't like that strange square in the street, not one bit, but there wasn't much to do about it. A few people were taking pictures, so I went back inside and put my phone on the charger to do the same. My roommates and I locked the house up tight that night. We couldn't see the black square from any of our windows, but the mere knowledge of its presence was like a chill in the air. It was the night owl of the 4 of us, and when the others went to bed, I quietly stacked boxes full of junk from the basement to block the windows just in case. In the morning, nobody commented in approval of the boxes, but neither did they take them down. I stepped outside to confirm that the anomaly was still there. This time, I took pictures. I'd seen more than my fair share of movies and shows about creepy anomalies, but it was another thing having one actually show up outside my house. In person, there's a balance of risk versus curiosity, and there was nothing we could do about the square without endangering ourselves. We couldn't get too close to it because who knew what would happen, and we certainly couldn't go inside it. So, it sat there. And in large part, we ignored it in our day-to-day lives. But there's also another kind of risk. The unknown. And the stress effect on your community and on your health. Each morning for a week, I would look to my right at that eerie black square and wonder if I was being watched. Or worse, was it some kind of hole from somewhere that might let in horrific entities beyond our understanding? Or hell, even just basic clawed creatures we could understand. That would be horrifying. A simple wolf or bear on the loose on our street would have been an emergency warranting help. And here we were with the possibility of literally anything appearing at any time. On a random night that about 8 people were over to play board games, Idle asked again if I would call somebody. This time, I agreed. But who? And how? I did find some numbers for 2 local news channels. I sent in my pictures, but they laughed at me and said that they looked photoshopped. I insisted that no, it was literally just a black square. And they told me to call back when I had something scarier. The military was an obvious answer too, but how does one call the military? I didn't exactly have a phone number for the military. Every night for a week, I waited on hold with various desks, bases, and institutions, repeating my story verbatim each time. A strange anomaly has appeared in our neighborhood, and I need somebody to come take a look at it. Some secretaries hung up on me immediately, but I finally got one that laughed. He said, "Watching some X-Files tonight." I sighed. Look, I've been trying to contact somebody about this for a week. Let's say, hypothetically, that I'm serious. Is there some sort of division or group for that? Yeah, let me call Area 51, buddy. They'll take care of you. Come on, there has to be some guy that takes weird phone calls and checks them out, right? That's no fun. Fine, I'll give you the number. Finally, I had it. The next conversation I had was promising, and a military jeep showed up the next morning. Idle texted me when she saw it park on the street, and I hurriedly went outside to greet one man, apparently. He was only slightly taller than me and stood staring at the black square with a haunted gaze. As I finally got his attention, he turned his head to look at me and said, "Motherfuck!" Right? I pointed down the street at the black square. That thing's been there for like a week and a half. Finally, prompted to move, he went to the back of his Jeep, pulled out a tripod and a camera, and set it up facing the anomaly. Watching him, I asked, "So, you're gonna call in the big guns, right? Somebody will take care of this?" His only answer was a glance. Then he got in his Jeep and drove off, leaving the equipment running. That was progress, I told myself. Somebody was aware of the issue now, and somebody was on it. Small consolation as the days wore on. One of the neighbors boarded up their windows, and then everybody did. Nobody asked the first house to do it if they had seen or heard something scary. We just did it. That day we went to the hardware store, endured the awkward process of explaining what we were doing to the overly helpful employees, and then took our boxes of nails and stacks of wood and began hammering into the window frames. I winced at the first one that went awry and damaged the wall, but I figured our security deposit was long gone anyway. We kept the curtains between the glass and the wood so that the landlord wouldn't notice on a casual drive-by, although he would certainly see that the entire neighborhood had suddenly acquired bars and boards. If the area went to shit, would he lower our rent? Doubtful. Then my roommates and I got drunk together for the first time in months. The neighbors were doing the same thing in their boarded up houses and on their lawns, and eventually we had a sort of block party going. It was an eerie thing, all being connected and bonded by a common threat, but being unable to mention that threat even as it loomed in the distance at all times. There was nothing we could do about it, so mentioning it publicly was impolite. As dusk deepened and somebody started a bonfire in their backyard, I almost couldn't stand the pressure of what was happening. That thing might turn deadly and kill us all any time, but I wasn't even allowed to mention it without pissing people off. Boarding up our houses? We were all reacting to it. We were all aware it existed. We all knew, everyone else knew it too, but we couldn't talk about it. A weird defensiveness was emerging amongst the conversations I overheard. This was our street, and none of us could afford to move away, therefore the black square had to be harmless. There were even people talking about the idea that there was nothing wrong at all. And that talk was growing. Agitated, I left the block party. I still wanted to drink, but angrily now, so I went to the nearest bar and sat. By pure chance, to my left was the soldier who'd set up the camera equipment. He was half sloshed already, and he looked sidelong at me while holding the bar to keep himself up. He laughed darkly. It's you. It was almost a relief to see that he was still in town. You guys gonna do anything about that black square once you collect enough info? He sat taller and focused his bloodshot eyes on me. Guys? Yeah, your team or whoever. It's just me. Oh, well, what about the higher-ups? He downed another shot that he had just been delivered. Higher-ups? My whole department got cleaned out by the new administration to cut costs or something. The only guy in my entire building. My beer arrived and I took a sip of it while trying to fully understand what he meant. Like temporarily? Are you waiting for new hires? He gave an exaggerated shrug. It's been 7 months. Nobody talks to me or tells me anything. I just get a paycheck automatically. No emails, no nothing. I'm thinking maybe they just forgot to transfer me when they got to the rest. I don't think anybody even knows I'm still here. That was an off-putting thing to hear. Then what do we do about the black square? He gave a long, drunk belly laugh. Brother, there are 47 anomalies in Ohio alone. And I'm the only person in this state left in the department that handles that shit. Just be happy that yours isn't making people crazy or changing your muscle tissue into acid while you sleep. Does that happen? He stared forward at the venue's long, mirrored back wall for a moment. Unmoving except for the muscles in his jaw tightening, as if he was grinding his teeth. After a tick, he suddenly reached over and clapped me on the back. Nothing so dramatic as that, I'm just playing. He got up, threw some cash on the bar, and began to stumble away. Wait, I called after him. What's your plan for the black square? Plan? He yelled back on his way to the door. You're on your own, brother. I skirted through the crowd and pushed out into the night. What about the 46 other anomalies? He kept walking and soon became small in the distance. Was it really possible there was nobody manning the defenses for things like this? We were simply open to danger with no one else to respond. It was the only working plan to hope that nothing bad would happen. What the hell kind of plan was that? I returned home even more agitated than before. It was about 3 weeks after the appearance of the anomaly that those that insisted the black square was harmless became the majority. We had been able to complain about it, make jokes, watch it fearfully before the afternoon, but the winds changed, and I immediately found myself on the outside with no warning. If I glanced suspiciously at the black square, someone would deride me for it. If I tried to measure it to see if it was growing at all, someone would come out on their lawn and tell me to stop, and that I was wasting my time. By the 4th week, those reactions became veiled threats. Bill was standing out on the sidewalk the first day of that 4th week. I had just come home from playing a card game elsewhere, and he approached me rather angrily. Stop making trouble, he said without sugarcoating it. Me? He was a large man in multiple ways, and I took a step back warily. I'm just not willing to accept that the incredibly odd anomaly in the middle of our street is safe. The black square isn't causing any trouble, he growled. You're the problem here, pissing people off, going against the grain. People want to sleep soundly, and they can't do that if you fill their heads with nonsense dangers. If it's nonsense, I asked, then why are your windows boarded up? He balled a fist. 'Cause that's how it's always been around here. Everybody does it, and always has. Hell are you talking about? It was just last month that... He slugged me in the stomach. I backed away. There was nothing left to say. I understood exactly what was happening. He glared from the sidewalk until I went inside and closed the door behind me. 2 mornings later, screaming erupted from a few houses down. 9 of us rushed out of our homes with makeshift weapons, only to find that the danger had been the night before. Someone's windows had been broken, and the wood beyond has been clawed mightily by something that had left traces of azure ichor behind. I thought that Certainly, it would be undeniable now. It was obvious that something had come out of that black square and tried to get into a house. The only reason the single father and his 2 girls were alive, they'd boarded up their windows like everyone else. See, I said to those gathered, I told you, it's dangerous. But the single father in question shook his head. Of course you'd say that. How'd you do it? I began backing away almost instantly as all eyes turned on me. What? Bill said, yeah, likely what happened. What tool did you use to make those marks? And what's that blue shit? Is it toxic? Did you put Ethan's girls in danger by throwing toxic blue sludge on their house? Ethan added, and you'll pay for that window too. The hell is wrong with you people? I clutched my bat and continued moving backwards. Idle came out of her house then and asked some of the others in the group what was going on in Somali. They backed off, and Bill and Ethan shot me hateful glances. On the way back to my place, Anton shook his head as I crossed his driveway. Gonna get yourself killed, boy. Whispering, I asked, what, by insisting that the physics-defying anomaly in our streets possibly dangerous? Just saying. I sit in front of this thing all day, every day. It freaks the hell out of me. I don't say nothing. Not to anyone else around here. Neighbors are more dangerous than that thing, you get it? Keep your head down. I mulled over his words for another few days, while the attitude in the neighborhood became openly hostile. More claw marks and strange azure liquid appeared during each night, and Bill started enforcing what he called his right to open carry by walking around on the sidewalk with an automatic rifle slung over his shoulder. And then Ethan started doing it too. Made me tense as hell, but they'd often talked about gun responsibility, and a part of me was glad to have weapons around given that something was probably coming out of the black square each night and trying to get into our houses. At 4 a.m. on the first night of the 5th week, I heard loud banging on the front door. For 20 minutes, I listened to someone pounding and yelling outside until one of my roommates shouted from his bed, "Fuck off, Bill! We don't have to answer the door for you. We're not parked in your goddamn spot!" The knocking went silent. My other roommate called from his room. That's the first time he's ever actually gone away. At that, I sat up starkly in my bed. I knew something had happened out there, some spark. Perhaps the unseen creature had finally gotten someone. Perhaps it had gotten one of our neighborhood children. I grabbed my baseball bat and put on my tennis shoes. Other than that, I was only in shorts and a t-shirt, but there was no time. Running into the dark hallway that connected our rooms, I whispered, "Get your gun out." "What?" my roommate asked. "Get your goddamn gun ready," I practically hissed. "They're coming for us." There was a crash of glass and the sound of boards being ripped off in the back of the house. To punctuate what I'd said, I heard my roommate jumping up and fumbling around with the case that held his gun. My other roommate just said quietly and fearfully, "They're not coming for us. They're coming for you." In the dark, I heard his door close and lock. This was no movie situation. I knew this would end very quickly between untrained civilians, and I knew that I was at a big disadvantage. If the windows hadn't been boarded up, I would have escaped that way, but I was forced into a corner. I only had knowledge of the terrain and the advantage of surprise. Using long steps to avoid the parts of the floor that creaked, I moved out into the board game room, and a big silhouette moving around the corner became a wide-open target for my bat. I swung without restraint as hard as I could. I'd never tried to kill anyone before, but I was amazed at how lethal my strength felt when the restraints were off. The bat snapped in half on Bill's head, and he fell to the floor. He limply tried to resist, but I pulled at his rifle while screaming obscenities, and he gave it up while groaning on the floor and whimpering about his head bleeding. I'd won, but unfortunately there were 7 more silhouettes behind him. Ethan was among them, and I saw his face by moonlight as they dragged me out into the street. "This asshole nearly killed Bill," he shouted. "Proof positive he's the one behind the attacks." "You came into my house with guns," I screamed at them. "Goddamn psychopaths." There were 20 other people out there already, many sticking to their own lawns. By the lights of the full moon, they watched fearfully. Some of them asked if what I was saying was true. Ethan yelled over to me, "He'll say anything to trick people! Fake news!" Fake? He was still holding my arms, but I struggled. "This is ridiculous! You've all got guns! You literally just broke into my house in the middle of the night!" "Fake! Lies!" Ethan insisted to the neighbors as we passed, and they kept pushing me and dragging me. As we passed Idle on her lawn, I realized where we were going. She ran forward to kick at Ethan. "I did not leave my country just for you to be the same." One of the men stayed behind to keep her restrained, and I nearly got away because of the distraction, but unfortunately, they caught me and continued moving me towards the black square. Even in moonlight, it was starkly visible. "Why are you doing this?" Ethan snarled. "You know, you monster. I can't let you live after what you did to my little girl." I could see one of the wooden barricades among his windows had failed. Something had broken its way inside, and red blood was mixed with the azure pools usually left behind. "So you're gonna kill me by throwing me inside the black square?" I asked loudly, so that everyone around could hear. "How does that make any sense if you insist it's not dangerous, that I'm the one who somehow orchestrated these attacks in the night?" One of our neighbors screamed, "Stop trying to get out of this! Fake news!" She turned and insisted to someone else that I was a liar. "Getting rid of him will stop the attacks!" They were lost. I'd known it, but it was only now that I truly accepted I was not in a neighborhood surrounded by peers. I had been living in hostile territory, surrounded by enemies for weeks, and they'd become delusional because of their own fear. Living with fear every single day and being unable to do anything about it had turned their fears into anger, and now anger had become violence directed at the only target that they could actually reach: their neighbor. On that first night of the 5th week, they kicked me forward and pointed their guns at me, forcing me to walk into the black square. The unknown source of their fear. It had come to us from somewhere else, but it was now the desperate void at the center of our lives. It was our heart. I'd never felt more sharp and aware. Adrenaline seared fire through my every nerve as I kept moving forward away from the guns at my back. The dark square expanded rapidly in my sight, but then grew more slowly as I came nearer than ever before. It asymptotically filled half of the sphere of what I could see. I kept waiting to pass the threshold like a door, to see the sides I'd tried to find with the stick and ropes over the last few weeks. But it never came. I kept pressing forward, only to find myself still half in the world I knew and half in the darkness, until I turned around and saw Ethan and the others very far behind me. My brain struggled to process the shape or the curve of what was happening, but I had the distinct sensation that I could keep walking forever and the black square would remain a giant sail pressed against half of me, except I knew there was an unseen drop-off, and perhaps that was the key. Perhaps the door was actually down, and the black square we could perceive was merely a higher dimensional perceptive. I got down on my knees and hands and began to crawl. I couldn't afford to fall accidentally. "Don't bother!" Ethan shouted in the distance. "You're going over! You're not getting out of this!" There it was. I could feel the edge. Here the black square was almost exactly half of what I could see around me. Directly above, to the left, to the right, and down. The paved street far beyond Bill and Anton's house, part of the street I'd stood upon many times coming the other direction, now met sheer void. But it wasn't dark. Light had always been coming up from below. There'd just been nothing for it to reflect from so that we could see it. Light came up from below now, illuminating my face, my eyes, my mind. It was a ghastly light, certainly not ever a color that had graced our world before, and I could see everything by the cast of its deep glare. I'd never seen that color with the rods and cones in my eyes before, but I knew what it was. If you could open a door into the mind and observe the cues within, if you open that door into the mind of a person being tortured with perfect and exacting skill, you would see the chroma of pain, not just the feeling of it or the idea of it in thought, but the blood of the concept, the core, as a brushstroke on existence. For some reason, I laughed, but I did not smile. I stood and I began to walk back. Ethan held his assault rifle forward. "Don't you come back here! Don't you fucking do it!" I just shook my head. The other men behind him raised their guns too, but they were waiting on him. I didn't slow. I couldn't. As I moved towards Ethan, I told him, "You're a human, Ethan. Fundamentally capable of good or just neutrality, of cooperation, of peace." The words spilled directly from my raw brain and into the night sky. "You are not like what's over that edge. Take a look for yourself. You'll understand." The barrel of his weapon glimmered darkly by moonlight, but the square behind me was blacker. "What do you mean?" he asked after a moment, the strain of oncoming terror dampening his tone. I think he saw the look in my eyes. Some small fraction of what I had seen had to still have been lingering in my irises like a rotting reflection gone bad. "What's in there? What's over that edge?" I couldn't really think at that moment. I put my forehead to the barrel of his rifle and grasped for the trigger under his hands. "Please." He pulled away in fear. "You're crazy!" They were no longer a threat now. I drifted past them and back to my house, where one of my roommates peered out of his door and apologized, and the other finally finished finding his ammunition. "Danger's past. Don't bother," I murmured, before going into my room and sitting on my bed. It took 6 days for my brain to develop a coping mechanism. For 6 days, I sat and stared at any blank white wall I could find. It was eye bleach in a way because it had every color and none. After 6 days, I felt nothing, and that was my release. To scab and scar over what had happened to my mind. My brain had amputated my emotions. And good for that. I would feel horrible at the loss of love and joy and friendship and companionship. But I can't. And that's better than feeling what I witnessed over that edge. Bill was back from the hospital by then, and feeling rather sheepish. A neighborhood watch had been set up, and armed men were taking turns guarding the black square, around which they'd built a wall of bricks and cement. They knew that nobody would be coming to help. No police, no military, no government. We were on our own, a fact which made Idle sad, as she talked to me about the home she'd left, where it had been exactly the same in her village. "This is humans," I told her. "Sometimes we do better for a little while. Sometimes we don't." She didn't have a chance to reply before Bill came up and sat carefully down next to me on my porch. He rubbed his bandaged head and said, "Sorry about what happened last week." I kept watching my armed neighbors around the black square. It doesn't matter. It does, though, he muttered, looking downcast. We could have killed you. It doesn't matter, I said again. He swallowed audibly and then asked, What'd you see in there? Think the neighborhood will go to shit now? Now? It amazed me that it was right there. It was right there, just 100 feet away. We were alive and standing here breathing air and eating food and having conversations just a few 100 feet away from that. It was always there, Bill. The only thing that changed 6 weeks ago is that we can see it now. We don't talk much anymore. The neighborhood is quieter than before. We just sit and wait for the inevitable. Each day and each night. The black pit is among us, lurking in open sight, and one day it will spill forth ungodly hordes I don't need to describe because you already know what they look like. Sometimes we do better. Sometimes we don't. Hey, did you like that creepypasta story that you heard today? I bet you did, because you stuck around to hear the outro. So, if you want to find more creepypasta stories like this, check out the links in the description down below that lead you over to the Creepypasta Collection, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 and Volume 2 also have a bunch of stories from some of the best authors I've worked with in the past 15 years, which I think is pretty high praise, seeing as it's like, 4,000 stories? That's right, 4,000 stories. Subscribe, you'll see them. But yes, 2 books available, Amazon, link down below, check them out. Also, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody on this list of Patreons. Some of these amazing folks are Diana Kraus, AcidSystem, Blake Rattler, Brandon Mendoza, Brenna Crow, Caltuna, ChicagoHitman, CoryxKenshin, CrusaderChocobo, Dakota Best, Daniel Poulsen, Dante Kinkade, Enchanted Buns, Estebean, HIDive's nephew, himbojerry, Our Minute Seconds Time, Ingegerd Solstrom, Jay Kearns, Jadis Pet, McMog, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Psychomel, Plant Piz, Red Shadow Cat, Remember the Sun, Salty Surprise, Samara Lynn, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sully Man, Tolly Sue, Team Leo 76, The Demented Voice in Your Head, The Chavez Brothers, The Ginger Bros, Tommy Walters, Viceroy Scorn, William Wellington, Your Bro Keegan, Zabub, and Shadow Gardens. A huge thank you to you guys, everybody who shows up in the description down below, and as always, folks, sweet dreams.